Hello and welcome back to Dance Cultures in Contexts. Today we're going to look at Cahuilla bird singing and dancing as a way of looking a bit more in depth at a dance that has long been practiced in the Riverside region. And we're also going to look at how the 4 guidelines I've provided for this class can be applied to this dance. First, we're going to start by thinking about what is Cahuilla bird singing. So Cahuilla bird singing and dancing is a dance practice of the indigenous people of Southern California. Bird songs and dance are an important part of Native culture for many tribes in the Southern California and region and in parts of Arizona. So it's not just a Cahuilla practice, it's also practiced by Mojave and Kumeyaay and other indigenous peoples in the region. Cahuilla is the name of the indigenous people whose tribal land includes Riverside, California. Today there are 9 Cahuilla bands, so even within the term Cahuilla, there's multiplicities of locations. Bird singing and dancing is a centerpiece of most Cahuilla social and cultural events. Where's Cahuilla land? So here's a couple of maps to help you situate the areas that we're talking about in California and in the region, and you can see Riverside as a part of Cahuilla land. In this closer up image, you can see some familiar landmarks in the region, Mount San Jacinto, etc. And here's a map that shows Cahuilla land in relationship to lands of other peoples in the region. In this unit, we're going to focus on the 4 viewing guidelines that I've been providing for this course: narrative and intention, historical and social environment, situation and surroundings, and dance movement. We'll be looking at those all in the Cahuilla bird singing and dancing examples. My goal is both to help you learn something about Cahuilla bird singing and dancing and its history and context as an indigenous dance form from Riverside, the Riverside region, but also to help demonstrate how to apply these 4 guidelines to gain a fuller understanding of dance and its importance as part of a culture, however you may encounter dance from here on. So let's start with the idea of a dance practice as narrative and intention. What does that mean? Narrative, again, is thinking about how the dance is structured. Does it tell a story? If so, what's the story and why does it tell that story? How does the dance unfold, repeat, or change or not change from start to finish? Narrative can also be about the intention, the reason why people are dancing, what the purpose is for it. What is Cahuilla bird singing for? Why do Cahuilla people do it? What does dancing in this way make happen or intend to make happen? Those kinds of issues. So, as the videos and readings that you've done also articulate, Cahuilla bird songs tell us the story of creation and migration to this land. The original Cahuilla bird songs included more than 300 songs that formed a cycle of stories, a song cycle, a story cycle. They were sung in a specific order that told the chronology of the migration, and the singing began at dusk and ended at dawn. So the 300, you had to know 300 songs, and you had to be able to sing them from dawn to dusk all night long to be an accomplished bird singer and dancer. Today, bird singing and dancing has adapted. For example, the songs are not always sung all night long. They are sometimes sung, just a few of them, at events around campus, for example, which we'll talk about in a minute. So, what's the intention of the dance? The songs and dancing present a spatial historical background of the local Cahuilla landscape and connect Cahuilla people to this land. The songs are sung in the Cahuilla language. Parts are often sung in an ancient Cahuilla dialect, so not even in contemporary language, but in an ancient Cahuilla language. They're a way of providing occasion for people to learn the language along with the songs. They're social. They provide a chance for people to gather, to socialize, to connect with other young people. It's a dance. It's a chance to get together, hook up. Today, Cahuilla bird singing involves all people, young and old, men and women, coming together to sing and dance and to celebrate life. In other words, Cahuilla people do bird singing and dancing in order to learn about their relationship to the land, to their language, to connect to the place they're from and to other people, and to celebrate and have fun. How does Cahuilla bird singing and dancing enable people to do this, connecting to the land and to each other? Well, here's some ways that we can think about that. Different bands and tribes in the region have variations in how they sing and dance bird songs. The way that Cahuilla bird singing looks and feels and sounds and is different from the way Mojave bird singing and dancing is and sounds and feels and is. And even different bands within who are Cahuilla bands or families within a particular band do things a little bit differently from one another. So knowing a particular way of singing and dancing to the bird songs is a way of knowing and performing your connection and relation to your specific clan and to the regional identity that you're connected with. Knowing how to do it your way within the context of a larger historical and cultural way of doing it is about knowing who you are and where you're from. You know, it's okay to include some personal style in the way that you sing and dance, as long as it's respectfully expressed within your specific clan and your regional identity. Will Madrigal Jr., who we're going to hear from in a little bit as a guest speaker for this unit, and who was consultant on all of this for me, thank you, Will, said, you can have fun, but just don't get carried away towards obscene when you're making changes in the dancing. So you still kind of have to play by the rules, but you don't have to do exactly what your parents did. Is my interpretation of what that means or what your elders are doing. It's okay to have some personal style, just within reason. So learning a particular way of singing and dancing a bird song and dancing in that way shows that you know the particular region that you're from. Showing some personal style within that form shows your unique place and importance within that particular clan or family or place. So both kinds of identity are getting enacted and performed. Next, we're going to look briefly at some of the history of Cahuilla bird singing and dancing. Where does this dance practice come from? How new or old is it? What place or communities usually perform it? What political, economic, cultural, social conditions or events is this dance now practiced in relationship to? These are questions that I've provided with this viewing guideline and that we're going to talk about a little bit now in relationship to Cahuilla bird singing. So bird singing and dancing has always been part of Cahuilla identity, but it went through a period of decline due to historical events surrounding the colonization of the U.S. and Mexico. And of course, the colonization of the U.S. and Mexico is a really long history, and I encourage you to learn as much about it as you can. Just very, very briefly to point out some changes that have particularly affected bird singing and the practices that we're looking at. There's the missionization period where Spanish missionaries set up missions in California and brought, some would say, enslaved indigenous people within them. This was from 1769 to 1833. And the continuing colonization of California and native peoples in this region by first Mexican, Spanish, Mexican, and then U.S. Governments. So there's the whole history of colonization, which has affected indigenous people throughout the United States and including Cahuilla people in the Riverside region. Then there's the boarding school history and policy, and boarding schools were schools that were set up by the government and to which Native children were taken, sometimes forcibly, from their families and educated in, according to European American standards. So this practice of boarding schools, of children being taken from their family and put into boarding schools around the turn of the 19th century into the 20th century, directly contributed to Cahuilla people losing their language and their knowledge of the bird songs. Students in boarding schools were not permitted to speak their indigenous languages. So if you couldn't speak the language, you couldn't learn the songs. Some of the songs are lost. It was part of a assimilation effort on the part of the government to kill the Indian and save the man, is one of the quotes that one of the people who set up the boarding schools was said to have said. Assimilate Native peoples into mainstream American culture. So during this time, roughly the 1940s to the 1970s, there was less transference of the actual tradition of bird singing from generation to generation. There was no one there to teach, and there was no one there to learn. The students were either in the military, in schools, or otherwise off the reservation because of the economic instability on the reservation. So following boarding schools, there was a lot of disruption, and bird singing as a practice that's passed from generation to generation was disrupted. It was in a period of decline. In the 1970s, a number of different things happened. One of them was American Indian activism changed the political climate in the U.S. for Indians indefinitely. And this is an activism that still resonates today. And again, this is a very long history, and I encourage you to learn all about it. Just briefly, the activism, the American Indian movement, and other groups that brought Native peoples together to claim treaty rights and to be politically active emerged in the wake of termination policies and relocation policies of the 1950s, where tribes were terminated, which meant to say that their trust relationship with the U.S. government was terminated, ended, and they were encouraged to move to urban centers, cities. And because people from different locations, different tribes, different reservations were moving together into urban environments, there was a lot of interrelationship between different Native peoples from different tribes. So what became politicized was this idea of a pan-Indian identity, or of an Indian identity rather than a specific tribal identity. People became identified as American Indians. And one of the things that grew in popularity at this period that emerged more fully were intertribal powwows, where people from various tribes would come together to dance and to share songs and food and art. Powwow dance has its own complex history, growing from removal policies that brought Native peoples from different tribes together, again, but earlier than the relocation policies, land policies that removed people from reservation lands, or that moved them from one part of their ancestral land onto a reservation somewhere else in the country, or what has become the country through these policies. So powwow grew out of, intertribal powwow was already happening before the 1970s for sure, but it increased in popularity and became a site for activism and for identity and for experiencing oneself as with pride as an American Indian, increasingly from the 1970s on. Powwow dance is based in Plains culture, Lakota, Anishinaabe, Pawnee culture from the Great Plains. And it's now practiced throughout the United States. So it's not Native Californian in its origins. Powwow dance comes from a different part of what is now the U.S. And the images that are associated with it, which are things like the Indian headdress, a lot of feathers, the drum, horses, teepees, images that are in popular culture as standing for Indian or American Indian tend to come out of Plains culture for a whole variety of reasons involving performance and Buffalo Bill's Wild West and the popularization of those images through what was popular culture of the day, these spectacles. But powwow dance became, in some ways, a sign for Indianness, as well as a place that people could come together and, really practice their dancing and their culture and their, have a sense of political connectivity to one another. But it's based in Plains culture. It's not based in Southern Californian culture. So what happened was both teachers and students of bird singing saw powwow culture with its base in Plains Indian culture and saw how it was changing the climate for American Indians and creating this sense of connection and pride. And they wanted this for California Indians too. So bird singing grew out of this and became a whole movement of its own, a whole kind of cultural revival movement, a whole place to create a place and way and practice for creating a sense of connection and pride. after the 1970s. In the mid-1970s, there was some academic and legislative support for programs that allowed Indian people to learn bird singing through a master apprenticeship program. The California Indian Arts Council provided a small grant that helped. It was not very much money, but it helped support master teachers and students, paying for gas money, paying for the ability to come together, and allowed students to develop a passion for learning the bird songs. And this started a learning movement that made people, especially young people who were starting to discern their identity and to claim their identity and to find pride in their identity as Native people, want to learn bird singing. The first teachers, the elders, bore the burden of stepping outside of their comfort zone and becoming teachers. They were already older, they were older people, but rather than just sitting back, they took on that challenge and responsibility to reach out to the youth and to spend hours and hours sharing, teaching, instructing, and then participating and singing with them. So this is what happened starting in the mid-1970s to bring bird singing into the vibrant state that it is today. It was in a period of decline. It was always there, but historically through colonization, through boarding schools, through missionization, parts of it were lost, but it has since been, in a sense, come back and been revived. Now let's look at the particular situations in which bird singing and dancing happens these days in and around Riverside. This includes noting things about the particular event, the occasion, the video that you're witnessing, including, for example, thinking about and paying attention to the date and place when and where the dance was performed and the occasion for it, the function of any music in the piece, the lighting in the set, if there are any, the clothing or regalia or attire being worn, the characteristics of the performers, such as their number, gender, race, age, body types, etc., and the characteristic of the audience or the other participants, such as their age, gender, race, etc., how interested they are in the dancing, their appearance and behavior. So these, again, are the categories that I've provided for this viewing guideline, and what I like to do is think about them now in relationship to bird singing at and around UCR. So today, Cahuilla people sing bird songs at many social and cultural events on the UCR campus as well as in the community. At UCR, the bird singers have sung at a graduation ceremony, at the UCR Native Student Powwow, at special presentations to welcome guests to campus. They've performed for the Dean's Office, at many, many Native American student and faculty events. Hopefully you will be part of one of the events and get to see them. In the region, they've also sung at the Sherman Indian High School, which is one of the federal boarding schools and is now an Indian high school. No longer having the same relationship as it did historically to taking children forcibly from their families, but now being run by Native communities themselves. They've sung at bird singing festivals, at many other community events and ceremonies. If we think about the music and its relationship in bird singing, the music is really essential. It's the bird singing and the gourd rattle playing are part of the dancing, and the dancing is part of the music. They are really dependent and interrelated to one another. The number of performers can range to, two or three, to dozens, and often there are, I would say, in the bird singing that I've seen, I'd say tends to be around 6 to 10 male singers and about the same number of female dancers performing in a group, but that number can change radically, especially if people are invited to join. The number of singers and dancers can swell considerably. And I've only seen a few, so it could be that there are many other occasions where many more dancers dance. The outfits worn by the dancers have changed over time. Today, men wear ribbon shirts, bandanas, and jeans, and women wear ribbon dresses, not grass skirts as they used to previously. Usually, bird singing is performed outdoors or at a community event, so there isn't any particular lighting or set required. It's just people come up and start to and dance, often as part of an opening ceremony or to welcome people, as I said. Bird singers and dancers range in age. Both young and old participate. Usually they're indigenous, native, Kauai, and their body types are those of regular people, not, trained to be super athletes or, the way that in ballet there's one particular body type that's required. There's a whole range of different types of body types that are possible and available and accepted. The group members appear to be highly skilled and to have learned together for a long time. In order to know the songs and know the Kauai language and be able to follow the musical cues of the leader, you have to have been studying for a while and been practicing for a while and been in connection to the other people who are teaching you for a while. On the whole, the dance steps appear to be fairly simple, which enables anyone to come and join, but they also appear to be, to me, they appear to be quite strenuous when performed over lengths of time, and like they require incredible focus, strength, and attention to subtle variations, especially if you think about the dancing going on all night long and the kinds of strength that it would require and focus. Now let's turn to looking at the dance movement, which is to say, looking at dancers' relationship to one another, the active body parts, the use of weight and lightness, speed, slowness, the use of space, and how these might be tools that we can think about in relationship to this dance practice. So, in Kauai bird singing, men and women stand in lines facing one another. The gender roles are different for men and women. The men coordinate the songs, the women coordinate their own dances. There are sometimes variations in these roles, though sometimes this does raise eyebrows. There's not a focus on everyone being able to do anything they want without restrictions. It's not about being creative and, doing the most outrageous thing you can think of or standing out, but more of a focus on balance between genders, in the universe in the wider sense, between everything. The separate roles for men and women are about maintaining this balance. The purpose should be on learning the form and imitating the bird. Again, many of these ideas come from Will Madrigal, who we'll hear from directly in just a minute. The men's movement. So, standing in a row, each dancer holds and plays a gourd rattle as they coordinate the songs, like when the song's going to start, what tempo it's going to be, when there's going to be shifts in the music that signal a shift in the kind of movement that is being done. As they play the gourd rattle, they make a low resonant sound, an aha sound called grunting, to call out from, I hope I'm going to say this right, Shemihiva, which is the power within, or our collective power, that which makes us human, Will Madrigal tells me. At a particular moment in the song structure, male dancers can break out into the open space between the men and the women and dance like birds, bending forward with knees bent and head moving up and down and side to side, with the torso and head moving up and down like a bird would. What makes it complex is that you are grunting to the beat, still rattling, moving your feet, and still dancing, says Will Madrigal, Jr. The women's movement. Women dance in a more controlled, graceful, subtle style with different levels of movement. Their hands and arms stay close to the body, although their elbows are more free to move. At the start of the song, there's a slower swaying movement with weight shifting from left to right. And then when the men start dancing in the space between the two lines, the women do more of an exaggerated move, hopping and moving from side to side, which I think you saw in the videos that you watched. Women's torso and hips are held mostly still and lifted, with movement initiated from the steps of the feet. Women's skirt bottoms may sway evenly back and forth rhythmically as they're doing the dance moves. The steps are small and in place with a little elevation and weight returning into the ground. And as I've said, it requires incredible strength in the legs and the lower back to dance in this way for hours. The women's dancing demonstrates that strength and power. So to summarize and review a little bit, what does looking at Kauai bird singing and dancing through these 4 viewing guidelines enable us to see? What interrelations might we find between, say, the movement and the history or the intention or parts of what surround the movement, like the attire? What connections are there? How does it help us to put these 4 guidelines into dialogue with one another? So to review them, the narrative and intention. People do bird singing and dancing to learn about their relationship to the land and to their language, to connect to the place they come from and to other people, and to celebrate and have fun. The songs tell the story of creation and migration to this land. History. There's a history in the bird singing of colonization, of loss and repression of indigenous language, and also of indigenous strength, of indigenous continuity, of renewal and resilience. Surroundings and the particular events that are happening today. Changes in the clothing worn show both the influence of non-native cultures over time on the dance form and also the way it is a contemporary practice in relationship to contemporary culture. Dancing at community events and occasions and on campus shows the importance of local community and of relationship to place in the dance. Movement. Movement shows the importance of community, of dancers moving together, staying together, of knowledge and language, the skill and learning required, including language learning, to be able to do these songs and dances and to know them, the particular relationship to one's family and clan shown in the way one dances, the strength shown to be able to dance like this all night long. All of these taken together in relationship to one another show ways that Cahuilla bird singing and dancing is about showing and practicing strength and continuity over time, including maintaining your language, even in the face of colonization, about knowing and valuing the place and land where you are from, about knowing who you are connected to in your community and staying connected with them. So there's some initial ways to start thinking about how bird singing and dancing relates to the 4 viewing guidelines that we've used in this class, and to think about maybe how to use the guidelines in approaching whatever dance forms you come into contact with, wherever they might be throughout your life. We have now as a special treat where Will Madrigal Jr. has agreed to come and speak with us about Cahuilla bird singing and dancing and talk with me and hopefully with you also about his experience and his understandings. Thanks.